Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. And everyone, welcome into another program, because today on the show, yeah, you guessed it, Ralph Bond. How'd you know? Ralph Bond joins us every single Friday. He is our science and technology trends correspondent, and he'll be joining us here in just a moment with a collection of stories, and they're all very, very fun today. And I think that is one of the key words, fun. Ralph does a good job of going out, finding stories that you may have missed. I know that I certainly missed a lot of these. It's they're supposed to be uplifting because just as Ralph and I were talking before the show, there's that horrific fire that happened out in Maui, and I'm glad that so many people are able to get off the island and get to safety, but so many as well have not. And yeah, of course, looking forward to to getting all of that sorted out and put back together, because man, it's like we said, it's not something you expect of a tropical paradise. So we'll bring Ralph on in just a moment, but before that, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, show notes, and of course we have a dedicated section now just for Ralph, where you can find all of his past shows, a playlist of his videos, as well as all the show notes. And they're super important because he puts everything in there. If you're like, no way, Ralph, that can't be the case, well, go check yourself. And of course, the links will be in the show notes. So with that being said, let's go ahead and bring Ralph on and have fun with it. So, as I said before, he's a longtime Computer America contributor, and of course, he is our science and technology trends correspondent here on the program. Ralph, how you been?
I'm doing great, and boy, talking about Maui and the fire and all that stuff. And there's big news, though. There's a lot of artificial intelligence research being applied to predicting fire behavior for firefighters to be able to better and more smartly and strategically battle fires. So if you think AI is scary, you think it's spooky, you think it's something that's negative, think again, because in so many fields of human endeavor, artificial intelligence is making monster contributions, and firefighting is one of them. That's been a big topic here in the Northwest, because I live outside of Portland, Oregon, and believe me, they're doing everything they can to figure out how can we fight these fires better using artificial intelligence. So that's an interesting little segue. For sure. To know where the fire is going to go, that's a big part of being a firefighter. Of course, drones. Of course, being able to keep an eye on the fire from above and stuff like that, and better communication equipment and whatnot. All very important, but none of that is involved in our 4 stories that you have for us today. So please go ahead, tell the nice folks out there who may be new, what is our mission with our show today? Yes, our mission every Friday is to uplift you, give you hope, and give you inspiration about where we are going in science and technology. We look at robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, all across the board, you name it. And again, come out to computeramerica.com. Get today's show notes if you want to dig deeper. It'll have links. It'll have pictures, especially important for anyone out there who's listening to us in the podcast. You want to come back and see the pictures, see the links, and learn more.
Absolutely. So for everyone out there that has seen this segment so far, they see the first story listed up there, and it's not the first time that we've talked about turning clean, drinkable water from the ocean. But I think this one has a bit of a bit higher aspirations, because they want to make it super simple for everyone.
Yeah, Ben, this is a really remarkable story. So let's get into it here. Headline is Company develops remarkable technology that uses the power of waves to turn saltwater into clean, drinkable freshwater. And I got this from a wonderful outlet called The Cool Down, a story by Brittany Davies. And again, in the show notes, we have links, we have pictures. There's even a link to all kinds of resources about this story. Some great images, by the way, and a link for a video too, which is very interesting. And Ben, before I get into the notes themselves, what makes this a standout and what caught my eye is this is a fully self-contained solution that floats out in the ocean. It's anchored with buoys, or it's buoys that are anchored to the sea floor and so forth. But the thing that's so remarkable and so well illustrated in the video the company put together is how this thing is a completely self-contained solution. But let me get into the story here for us.
Right.
A little bit of a setup first. Water scarcity is one of the greatest threats we face. And I didn't know this, as 1.1 billion people around the world do not have access to clean water. Oh, gosh. And more than 2.7 billion people experience water scarcity for at least 1 month of the year. That's horrifying if you step back and think about it. And UNICEF estimates that as early as 2025, nearly half the world's population could face water scarcity. Nearly half. Okay, this is a pretty serious problem. So there's a Canadian company called Onika, O-N-E-K-A Technologies, Onika Technologies. They're tackling water scarcity by harnessing the power of ocean waves to run its groundbreaking wave-powered desalination process. Again, it's a fully contained solution, folks, turning ocean water into fresh water that can be used by the coastal communities that need it most. So, of course, it can't solve your problem if you're in Kansas City, but it certainly can help
I mean, growing up in Florida, one of the biggest issues was saltwater intrusion. So, coastal cities have it rough.
Right. And the video you're showing right now is wonderful. There's the one of the systems in action here. So here's how this thing works. Onika deploys desalination buoys off the coast where the movement of water activates the process. And here's a little side note of my own. You really do, I stressed this earlier, you need to see this video to understand how the wave action is used to initiate a step-by-step process that ultimately results in drinkable water. And again, if you're listening to us on a podcast, please come out and get those show notes. And then from there, a series of self-cleaning strainers and filters remove salt, bacteria, and other particles from the seawater to produce clean, drinkable water that can be piped to shore for storage and use. And water quality and performance are carefully monitored by solar-powered sensors. So solar-powered sensors, their job is to monitor the quality and performance of the system. And they can provide data in real time to ensure the water meets or exceeds local water standards. Okay. And here's a little context. There's been lots of desalination technology. The Israelis are particularly good at this. Onika buoys improve upon previous desalination systems by producing no polluting emissions and requiring no dangerous chemicals, electricity, or land use. That's an interesting point. No land use, according to Onika's website, which is a really good website, by the way. And the company's mesh filters protect marine life and plants, while the brine management system maintains proper salt levels in the surrounding seawater. So it's a good citizen, so to speak, in terms of environment. And the buoy anchors can even be used as artificial reefs to help restore damaged underwater ecosystems. So far, it's sort of like a win-win-win-win-win scenario here, right?
A lot of positives.
Yeah. And and you say, oh, this all sounds great. Well, is this real? Is this happening? Well, they've done a successful demonstration of this proof of concept buoy system in the ocean waters off the coast of Chile in South America, of course. And Onika is now set to start developing its next evolutionary system, the Onika Glacier, a utility scale desalination buoy. So this is where they're headed. And my note for more information about this demonstration in Chile, I've put a link in the show notes, and it goes into great detail about this particular demonstration effort, this experiment, as it were, off the coast of Chile. It's very, very interesting, by the way, if you want to geek out on this topic. And currently, the company's largest model is the iceberg class. That's an interesting phrase. Iceberg class unit named the Glacier Boy, capable of producing 8 to 13,000 gallons of water a day, drinkable water, of course, or enough to support up to roughly 1,500 people. And that's according to their website. And the Glacier Boy aims to provide enough clean water to meet the needs of large population centers. Again, of course, in coastal regions and not across the whole country. And there's some more additional illustrations. There's an illustration of the glacial buoy, the large scale system. And then there's another illustration that shows the smaller size. They have 3 different sizes and shows a little illustration of how they're anchored to the seafloor, et cetera, et cetera. Great story, really interesting. And again, please see that video, folks, because it will explain how does this work? How is it a self-contained system? I just thought this was really clever.
It really is. And they've really, I think, crossed off a lot of the concerns I think that environmentalists would have, because, it's their solutions out there, but making sure that you don't, harm the local wildlife and, so on and so forth, is a really big issue. But man, Ralph, they really went by and just, kind of ticked every box. And of course, it's automated. The water just kind of goes. The video showed how it's all connected with hoses, so you don't, I guess you don't have to go out and like harvest the water. The water is, sent back to land. This thing, it seems like a lot of engineering, and it's very, innovative. When I think about desalination plants, I'm sure like a lot of people, I think about the giant factories that they're talking about on the shore that then pump the seawater in. I mean, this is really, really cool.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing that would be perhaps a little bit environmentally challenging are those pipes or tubes or hoses, whatever you want to call it, that do transport the water to the shore. There's a little bit of an issue there, perhaps, but overall, what a great solution, especially for economically challenged, say, third world countries on the coastline where they desperately need fresh water. And the other thing too, in the world of desalination, I think, Ben, I don't know when it was, maybe a year ago or something, we talked about companies developing ships. Self-contained systems on ships that would do desalination. But then in that regard, the cleaned water, the drinkable water, is stored in huge tanks on the ships, and the ships have to go back to shore and dispense the water and so forth. This scheme is a continuous, constant 24/7 flow of fresh water, which I think is just remarkable.
And you know what would, and I'm not sure how they would really do it, but I'm wondering if they could also, because desalination is taking salt out of water, what they do with the salt. I'm assuming that, through the processes, they kind of, put the little bit saltier water back in the ocean, and it doesn't make a drop in the bucket. It just disperses. I'm wondering if there's a way to harvest that, because there's another, ladies and gentlemen, we're supposed to uplift you, but I'm going to give you another, oh no moment. Ralph, I didn't know if you know this, but we're actually running out of salt. Of salt. And I'm going to Google it, but saying that salt deposits, they're quite extensive. Also, but the readily accessible salt that we are mining now is looking like, these, they're running out, are readily accessible ones. Not saying that we can't get more, but it'd be nice if, systems like these started to also incorporate harvesting salt to, kind of add to it a little bit more. But
to your point, Ben, what this current system does, and maybe it could ultimately do what you're referring to, capturing that salt. Right now, they have this so-called brine management system that dispenses the removed salt materials and et cetera back into the water, but in a way that doesn't harm sea life and doesn't harm the environment. So that's their contention. They've covered that issue with brine management. Right. But hey, maybe they could be capturing. It could be this wonderful triple win. Just something a little bit more. Very, very cool. And of course, the more autonomous and the more kind of self-contained they can be, I think you're going to see a lot more people
being able to kind of put these out there and enjoy them. They're almost so small, and they look like a buoy, or almost like a small research vessel. Not saying that they're pocket sized, but I wonder, Ralph, if you're talking about these large ships. Imagine if you could, because it kind of uses the waves to power everything behind it. Imagine if you could, maybe drag these things behind those big ships you were talking about, and have the water pump back to the ships. It would just be towing these things with, minimal drag. They're bouncing in the wake of the ship anyway, so they, kind of power themselves. Possibilities, lots and lots of possibilities. And this one, very, very cool. And again, the website is super informative, so check that out as well.
Yeah, very cool. That idea of dragging one of these things behind a ship, take these gigantic cargo freight ships that we see, right? And you got to imagine they must have these very heavy water tanks to keep the crew with fresh water for their long journeys over the oceans. Well, again, to your point, if you could drag these things and pump water in as almost on an on-demand basis, so to speak, reducing the weight of the vehicle, the ship overall, would help reduce fuel consumption, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a fun idea. There's
lots of possibilities with this. So story number one, and what's fun about this one as well, just real quick, right here at the top of the page, they say get a quote. So if you want to buy one yourself, contact them, and they'll set you up with one. So it's real. It's not research. Like you said, they're working on their next gen version, but they have workable units available now. So that's very nice. Story number one. Story number two. Our good friends over at MIT have done something a little bit different, and every good house, and trust me, you aren't enjoying it when you don't have one. Every good house has a good, solid concrete foundation. Story number two hopes to turn that into something more than just something that sits there.
Yeah, turning the concrete foundation of buildings, et cetera, into something not just passive, but active in terms of contributing to your energy scenario. So let's get into this story. Here they go, MIT again. MIT researchers developed energy storing concrete that could form foundations for solar-powered homes, and we're going to find out a lot more. This comes from New Scientist, a story by Jeremy.
I'm going to say this plays right into your wheelhouse, Ralph, because obviously being with Autodesk, before you semi-retired, that this seems like I think better than most how important the durability and don't mess with the formulation of concrete. But if you can make it good, then concrete has to be very specific in construction.
Ben's reference to my Autodesk days was 10 years with them as the tail end of my regular career in high tech. I was in the architecture, engineering, and construction division of the company, and that's where he's referring to my love affair with this stuff. That's another reason why I love this story. So again, from New Scientist, a story by Jeremy Sue. Great images here, but let's get into this. According to the results of a recently conducted set of experiments at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a mixture of cement and charcoal powder could enable houses to store a full day's worth of energy in their concrete foundations. Okay, there's so many ding, ding, dings in that one sentence. Let's go check this out, folks. A mixture of cement, is that an exotic material? No. Charcoal dust or powder, is that exotic? No. Could enable a house to store a full day's worth of energy in their concrete foundations. What's not to love about this, right, Ben? Okay. So here's a little more of the technology. So what they've done, this represents a new way of creating a supercapacitor, which would be an alternative to batteries that can discharge energy much faster. So folks, time out. You know how Tesla has home batteries and other people are creating home batteries. You've got solar panels on your roof. You have the option to store your own energy on site with a battery. So that's what we're talking about, an alternative way of doing this supercapacitor. And this new supercapacitor, again, made concrete and charcoal powder, could be incorporated into the foundation of both buildings, your home, office buildings, whatever, and or the foundations for wind turbines. But wait, there's going to be more in a moment here. When paired with renewable energy sources, this sentence just knocked me off my chair. It could also someday allow concrete road foundations to wirelessly recharge electric vehicles as they drive along. I love it.
We've seen some of the other solutions for that, but it's always kind of overhead, kind of ambient wireless energy. So this would be built in. That's crazy.
Isn't that wild? There is a reality check coming up, but still, it's great. So here we go. MIT's Franz Joseph ULM is the way the last name is spelled, notes, quote, the materials are available for everyone all over the place, all over the world, which means we don't have the same restriction as with batteries. That's, again, that point about concrete, not exotic, charcoal powder, not exotic, available everywhere, pretty much. Okay, so and his colleagues showed how cement and carbon black, a very fine version of charcoal, can mix with water to create a hardened block containing many branching wire-like structures filled with carbon. And that's what's shown in the illustration. It looks like lightning bolts, but that's what we're looking at here, these wire-like structures filled with carbon. Now, when the concrete is soaked in a common electrolyte solution, such as potassium chloride, the charged particles from the electrolyte settle on the carbon wire-like structures to provide energy storing potential. In the show notes, I have a side note on what is an electrolyte. If you want to get a little high school education on that, go back and check the show notes for that. We'll move on, though, to the story. They then turned 2 thin slabs of the material, just 1 centimeter wide and 1 millimeter thick, very thin, right, into a supercapacitor by separating them with a thin insulating layer such as paper. Gee, another exotic material, right? Connecting 3 of these supercapacitors produced an equivalent of a 3-volt battery capable of lighting up a small LED light. Well, that's very modest, but the researchers say the next step might be to create a 12-volt supercapacitors that can also be connected to provide more charging power for larger devices. So friends, one of the things about this, talk about my job as trends. This is twinkle of the eye, early research, okay? So keep that in mind. The team calculated that a concrete block equivalent to a cube of 3.5 meters, that would be 11 feet 6 inches on each side, could store 10 kilowatt hours of energy. And to put that into human perspective, that is about a third of the average daily household energy use in the United States and about 2/3 of the average in the United Kingdom. So that gives you a sense of what we're talking about. 11 feet, 6 inches cube of this material could do that task. Now, the mixture of cement and charcoal powder material maintained its charging and discharging capabilities beyond 10,000 cycles, which means, and here's the reality check, in theory, that it could provide energy storage for a solar-powered home for more than 27 years. So there is a cap to this. There's a limit to this. If you did this in the roadways, for example, as I alluded to earlier, it would be good for 27 years, which is terrific. But after 27 years, well, maybe we'll have a whole new world of technology anyway.
Well, and I think that's kind of the fun part. And this research needs to reach its a bit more of a finished state. But Ralph, after 27 years, it's still a foundation for a road. It doesn't stop being a road foundation. That's right. So that's kind of the nice part as well.
Yeah. And some more comments from the team. Admir Masik at MIT noted, quote, the fundamental aspect of this technology is its 2 historical, ancient materials that come together that we have known for millennia. So that's another reason why I love this so much. And here's the part that's so uplifting, so inspiring. Are they going to keep this to themselves? Are they going to try to make money off of this and, hoard this? No, the MIT team expressed optimism about how many people worldwide could start experimenting with this relatively simple blueprint for a low-cost supercapacitor. So MIT, God bless you. You're releasing this to the world. You're saying, here's what we've discovered. Have at it, world. Let's go forward and see if we can employ this. And this goes back to something, Ben, you and I keep talking about nearly every Friday. Solving climate change, solving what's going on in our world right now is not going to happen with any one specific technology. There's no silver bullet to this, but there's a lot of great bronze bullets out there, and you put them all together and it equals an amazing gold bullet to solve our problem, right? And this is just another. We talked about white paint on the top of roofs as the whitest paint ever made that can help deflect heat, so forth and so on. Just all these things, just link them together like a molecular chain. That's how we're going to conquer climate change. Not one solution, but many working together, and this could be a really great contributor.
Yeah, and really, story number 2, you could think that when they continue to refine it, get a little bit better, maybe find a way to, maybe just sell the concrete premix, and so people would just have to go and, maybe they said layer after layer after layer, so maybe a house foundation would be a bit more labor intensive, but at the end of it, if you get a giant supercapacitor that doubles as a foundation, just if they find ways to make it simpler, Ralph, I mean, it's a no-brainer because you're building these things anyways. You have to have these things anyways, and making them double useful is, just all the more important. So
I know, it's great. Love it.
So story number 2, and really, oddly enough, whenever we talk about concrete on the show, I always just go back to the self-healing concrete. So, a little bit different take on what concrete can do.
Yes.
So there you go.
In fact, it's a fun point you raise. You think, what is the most boring thing you can think of? Concrete. Let's all go to sleep.
Dusted rock,
folks.
right? Yeah.
Wrong. There is so much research. This is just one example, but there's a lot of research on what can we do with concrete? How can we improve it? How can we do different things? And so concrete, oddly enough, it's pretty exciting.
It is. So a little personal anecdote, and then move on to story number 3. I will say, Ralph, I'm sure everyone gets this. When you're talking to someone new, like I was at the dog park, making small talk with people there. This guy comes up to me. He has a dog, and it was like a King Charles Spaniel. No offense to King Charles Spaniel owners. Not the prettiest dogs, but my email is ben@computeramerica.com. But no, he comes up and starts talking to me. And Ralph, like, I don't know if you do this, like when you meet new people, you kind of overthink, what am I going to talk about? Just small talk, that kind of thing. He comes up and he starts talking to me about Roman concrete. And he was, telling me how they were, how they're still discovering why Roman concrete is so strong and structurally sound, thousands of years. And I was just standing there. I'm like, first of all, I'm into it. Like, I like Roman concrete and, stuff like that. But I'm like, I overthink too much when I think about things to talk about with people, because he just came up and he's like, hey, how you doing? He's like, so did you hear about Roman concrete? I'm like, tell me more. And it works. So I like concrete. That, I guess, is the short version of that. So story number 2. Story number 3, Ralph. Let's go ahead and continue on with NASA. And, to tie this into recent headlines, I think I just read this morning. Russia, I think, sent their first, I don't think it's manned, but lunar mission. They're sending a rocket to the moon to probably drop off a rover for the first time in 38 years. I think China says they want to have maybe it was 48 years. China wants to have a moon base with people on it in the next 15 years or 10 years. NASA says that they want to send a new crew back to the moon within 10 years themselves. The moon is going to be a very exciting place, which is cool, because ever since the Apollo missions, it's not really we've sent rovers and taken pictures, but going there has not been really a priority. But it's exciting to see that it is again.
Yeah. And I think the whole bit about human beings going back to the moon, for me, it's more, learning more about the moon and for science purposes and so forth is great. But I think it's the technology that gets developed. And this is that's really significant. The old bit we've talked about so many times. Think of all the things in your life that NASA research has brought to you. And you can always Google that. What technology did NASA do that became, mainstream? And you'll be amazed at what it is. But this story is really interesting, I think, and completely flew under the radar, in my opinion, of the mainstream press, and understandably so with all the news cycle that's going on these days. So here's the headline. NASA will land 3 autonomous mapping robots on the moon. The CADRE, we'll find out what that stands for, rovers will demonstrate the potential of multi-robot missions for NASA's new era of lunar exploration. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. Got this from an outfit called extremetech.com, fun website. Ryan Whitman's the author of this article. We've got the link. We also have a link to the JPL site, the developers of this technology. And the show notes, of course, have images and links, and we've got a video link as well. But here we go with the story. With its Artemis program, NASA is headed back to the moon. And this time, the goal is to set up a long-term human presence on Earth's natural satellite. Mm-hmm. Astronauts spending time on and around the moon may find an army of robotic helpers at their disposal, the first of which is being built and tested at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, good old JPL. This is a good example of one of these early technology kind of twinkle of the eye stories that I like to bring to the audience here. The Cooperative, Autonomous, Distributed, Robotic Exploration Project, of course, an acronym also known as CADRE, CADRE, will deploy a trio of autonomous mapping robots on the moon. And if successful, they could help NASA understand how best to build that army of bots. So they're going to start with 3, but that's just the beginning. The 3 CADRE rovers are currently in the engineering prototype phase. So you're getting a sneak peek, folks. NASA plans to deploy CADRE robots in 2024 via the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Initiative. The lander will touch down in the Rainer, that's REINER, gamma region of the moon. But unlike past rover missions, NASA does not intend to control exactly what each robot does. We're going to get into that more. In the show notes, folks, and especially if you're listening to us on a podcast, come back and get the show notes at computeramerica.com. I've got a side note on what the heck is the Rainer gamma region of the moon. Explains all of that, has an image and so forth and so on. You can learn about that if you're interested. But back to the story. Unlike the expensive and complex Perseverance Mars rover, where the NASA team must carefully plan each maneuver, the low-cost CADRE robots or bots are designed to operate autonomously. This is the big difference. NASA hopes to simply tell the robots which area of the landscape to investigate with their stereo mapping cameras, and the bots will figure out the rest, even electing a leader rover based on which is the most fit for the task. What? Okay, I have to do a personal side note here. Recently, I watched a fabulous documentary on Netflix called Unknown Killer Robots. Now, it's a little bit of a downer because it's all about military use of robots, but the technology behind it's fascinating, because for more on the concept of artificial intelligence-based autonomous swarms of bots with a leader, I highly recommend watching this documentary again, Unknown Killer Robots. This is a really, really interesting. You've seen the bit about replacing fireworks in the sky with Intel was really into this too.
Drones.
Hundreds of drones synchronized to do a pattern and so forth. That's fine. But we're talking about autonomous bots in a swarm, choosing a leader and doing their thing, which is different than the choreographed fireworks in the sky with drones. Okay. So the mission managers will, however, be watching what these rovers do after being unleashed. The lander will have a control base stationed with a camera poking upward to keep tabs on the bots. So human beings are going to kind of watch and see what these little guys do. Here's how the CADRE bots share something in common with the Mars Ingenuity helicopter. This gets into some really interesting stuff about cost effectiveness of this idea. So the CADRE bots, they partially owe their existence to the smashing success of the Mars Ingenuity helicopter. Originally envisioned as a technology demonstrator, the helicopter was built using many off-the-shelf components that JPL did not expect to survive long on Mars. However, Ingenuity is still online, having recently completed its 50th flight.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and that's something. And Ingenuity ran on a Snapdragon 801 smartphone processor. What? And NASA says CADRE will use a newer version of that chip as well. JPL confirms that the CADRE rovers will use the, I'm not sure if it's Voxel, VOXL, all
Voxel,
caps.
yep.
Vauxhall single board computer, which runs a Snapdragon 821 chip. And by the way, that's the same processor that powered the Samsung Galaxy Note 7. How about that? I mean, we're not talking about exotic stuff here.
Really, other than Apple, if you use anything other than Apple, you're pretty much running a Snapdragon processor. So very, very common. You probably have one in your pocket. Yeah.
And how efficient and cost effective this is, right? I love it. And here's another thing that's kind of fun about this story. It has to do with the challenge of heat. You don't think about heat on the moon? Well, check this out. Keeping the solar-powered CADRE bots cool is another challenge JPL is working on. Temperatures in direct sunlight on the moon can reach 237 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 114 Celsius for our friends outside of the United States. So the team decided to run CADRE in 30-minute cycles. By the way, Ben, 237 degrees Fahrenheit? I never ever thought about hot temperature. Our poor astronauts and other astronauts from whatever country that go up there, wow. I mean, that's a serious challenge.
When people go to, either Cape Canaveral in Florida or Houston down in Texas, and they see those suits, they always think, okay, so they're so insulated to keep them from freezing in space, because you think of space being cold. But no, they had to survive extreme UV radiation with almost no filtering and extreme heat as well. I mean, the suits alone are marvels of engineering. The lunar walking suits.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a big, light bulb of learning for me on this story. Going back to the bots, the CADRE bots, the three of them that they're going to initially put on the moon, operate for 30 minutes and then take another 30 to expel heat via radiators and recharge their batteries. Upon waking up, the rovers will again elect a leader. What a concept. And continue their autonomous operations. NASA hopes CADRE will prove the value of multi-bot missions for lunar exploration and development. So friends, this is a great story if you're into all this NASA stuff. Wonderful story, really fun.
And the article that you linked to from Extreme Tech has the article, and they have this video where this one's more for a drone that will eventually make it to Europa, but I'm sure it's using a lot of the same technology. And Ralph, I just couldn't resist, looking at the drone that they're using out there in the salt flats to kind of test it. Those wheels look very familiar. They're the mesh ones that we talked about the other week.
Yes, that's correct.
That potentially could not go flat, and you just have to replace the treads. But still, and they put little studs and spikes on them to give them better traction. But this animation right here, where if you're again watching the video, you can see it, where the robot itself will kind of pinpoint, high points, low points, and it will automatically, using AI, kind of map out the, what looks to be like 100 different routes that it could take trying to get to a point. And Ralph, I think that's the same technology they're going to apply to these drones, these lunar rovers, where they kind of say, here's where we want to get to. You're going to be the leader, and we're going to navigate this environment around us as best we can using that same kind of technology. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, no, there's so many things going on in this story. The low cost components, the AI, the swarm of bots with a leader. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. There's so many layers of fun stuff.
Yes, democracy on the moon. You heard it here first, folks. So, with that being said, maybe the only
place where democracy may turn out to be the only place. Maybe bots will be the only democratic system we have in this world. Is the way we're going.
I'm down with it. I'm down with it. The story number 3, story number 4. This one is, as is tradition, a medical story again. And this one tackles cancer, which it's kind of been our focus for the last 40 years. But this one has a new little trick that could make cancer's ultimate cure is kind of itself. It'll kind of take itself out, self-destruct. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, this is really great. A story from futurism.com, another wonderful website. Story here by Victor Tangermann. Headline: Scientists intrigued by clever trick that makes cancer cells self-destruct. What? Okay, that's very cool. Again, we have the link to the story in the show notes. Come out to computeramerica.com and get this if you're interested. And I'm going to insert a little honesty alert up front here. I don't profess to fully understand the science behind this story at all, but the positive implications of this as a potential treatment for cancer are so compelling. I couldn't resist. I wanted to share this. So smarter people than me, please get the show notes, dig deeper into this, especially if you're in the medical research profession. I think you'll find this fascinating. So here we go into the story. Researchers have discovered a mechanism that forces cancer cells to self-destruct, hijacking their ability to replicate uncontrollably and turning it against themselves. Uncontrolled, rampant, crazy replication is the hallmark of cancer. That's why it's such a problem. Now, a research team from Stanford University and gene therapy company called Shenandoah Therapeutics, together, they recently published a paper in the journal Nature describing how cancer cells can be rewired to activate cell death, not unlike kind of sort of flipping a switch. Wow. As the article's author notes, quote, while we're still a long way from developing a drug for humans that takes advantage of this gene hack, assuming it's actually possible in a practical way, scientists are nonetheless intrigued by the prospect. So, folks, again, this is an example of a trend, a twinkling of the eye, early research. Okay,
but it's pretty kind of well established because and hopefully I'm not getting ahead in the article. This is what cells do anyways. It's speaking of democracy, when your body says you're getting a little frayed at the edges. Your DNA is getting a little iffy. We can't really rely on you to reproduce without messing something up. The body kind of votes, and the cells self-destruct. That's they're like, you're doing more harm than good. I guess they're trying to turn that back on in these rampant cells, these errant cells.
You've nailed it. You got the essence of it. Absolutely. So in a number of lab experiments, the research team built molecules that attach two proteins to each other. Two proteins, okay? One being a mutated protein called BCL6 that allows cancer cells to survive and grow, and a normal protein cell that acts like a switch for the genes near it. Again, this is a little complicated. The resulting BCL6 and normal protein construct pushes cancer cells toward genes that kill them, effectively rewiring the cancer cells to kill themselves off, evoking a natural part of the DNA, this to your point, that clears old cells that have already fulfilled their duty. A point on right with what you were saying, Ben. And here are some comments. What follows here are some comments noted in the article, on the article I read, based on a feature in the New York Times about this research. So Louis Stalt, director of Center of Cancer Genomics, at the National Cancer Institute, told the New York Times, quote, BCL6 is the organizing principle of these cancer cells. Once disrupted, the cell has lost its identity and says to itself, something is very wrong happening here. I better die. It goes back to your point, right? It's kind of a funny almost way to put it.
Well, really, cells are very, kind of, I guess, heroic in the sense that they're like, it's like the world would be better if I weren't here, and not in like a nihilistic way, but in like a valiant way. It's like I'm not helping, the body or whatever it happens to be in. I'm gonna go, and then it goes. So yeah,
I like the heroic theme. That's better than the negatives committing suicide.
Right.
So the idea could be effective for half of all known cancers. Lead author Gerald Crabtree, founder of Shenandoah Therapeutics, told the New York Times. And since it relies on mutated cancer cells, it could also be a highly targeted approach, potentially sparing healthy cells. So they think they could make this controllable and targeted as well. And so far, Shenandoah Therapeutics' Crabtree, the fellow I just quoted, and his colleagues have demonstrated that the hybrid molecule they created is safe to use in mice, but was careful to note that it's not a drug. It still has a long way to go. But, another glimmer of hope in the world of cancer research.
Yeah, this all piggybacks on the research of CRISPR. If you remember that a couple years ago, they made a big hubbub about that, and rightfully so. You get these potential cures that are gene therapies, where they actually rewire your genetics instead of just I guess like radiation is, you take pills and you get the intravenous thing, and you essentially just bombard the body with almost killing all of your cells, but hopefully you kill the cancer ones first before you kind of damage the rest of your body. So this is a different approach, but still I like it a lot, because it's, again, doing something that cells do naturally. So even if you did, to the point here, BCL6, essentially put back in that self-destruct switch, all cells already have that. You're not going to be like, oh no, my entire body is rewired to self-destruct. No, that's not that's not what's going to happen. So very innovative, and again, private companies working with Stanford on this one. So very
wonderful
cool
story. Very cool. And then to wrap things up, we've got kind of a new tradition for long-term listeners and viewers. We now do, or I like to add, what I call honorable mentions. We're not going to get into this. I'm just going to read the headlines. The show notes have the links, but there's so many great stories. I felt frustrated not being able to mention some of them with our 4-story format. So here's the first one in honorable mentions: giant freshwater deposits hiding under the sea. From Scientific American.
I had no idea.
Relates back to that. This is a fascinating story, friends. Check it out. We've got the links in that. Another one: Air Force Research Laboratory touts first successful Valkyrie flight powered by AI. Wow. That's another one. Comes from The Hill. Got the link in the show notes. Here's the last one in the honorable mentions: guiding vaccine development with machine learning. From the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory website. Great story. I actually put in some of the opening notes there in the show notes. Check it out. Great stuff. Folks, the bottom line is science and technology can and will bring us a brighter future if we're willing, able, and ready to do it.
For sure. And Ralph, maybe next week, although it may be a little premature even next week, maybe the week after, one shout out to a headline I wanted to give just yesterday. Was reading about it, the possibility of a new fifth force of nature. Or the new fifth force that they're working on. They said that they're very, very kind of, very sure, but they got to, of course, find conclusive proof. And, they just said that they're hinting at it this week. Maybe in the following weeks, we're going to see something more conclusive, and I'm looking forward to that. So, maybe we'll cover that one in a future show as well, when we know more positive stuff. But ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out anything from this show, or of course past shows, computeramerica.com, and of course we'll have a link to Ralph's website as well if you want more of a Ralph focused experience. Of course, you will have a link to his site. But ladies and gentlemen, Ralph, I want to thank you so much for finding these stories. They're always a lot of fun. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in, and of course finding ourselves either on our site, podcast, website, social media. I have to go through and I have to change Twitter to X. It looks like he's not joking. It's not a joke. I do have to change the website. So there you go. Find us on X as well. So until next time, everyone, have a great day. Have a great weekend. Do something fun. Catch you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.